Batar,
Ya, Assalamualaikum, Prof.
salam. Kita background atas ketinggalnya.
Mohon semua.
Oke, tapi kita cek maler Pak. Gitu. Prof Ida, alhamdulillah.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Ya,
Ibu Wede.
Prof. Saya pindah ruangan ya.
Good evening, Professor. Nice to meet you. Welcome.
Hello, Professor Charles.
Good evening. I hope
Mr.
you
Jurgens,
can.
how are you?
Fine, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Good. Very good. Then technology works. That's important.
Yeah, it is very interesting how our word works now. Is the moderator here already? Where is Prof. Nandang?
Ya,
Is the MC? Is he here already? Because I think
Pak Agus silakan dimulai saja ke MC.
Bilkis, ya Bilkis. Sebentar, Prof. Ini
Prof Jurgen.
MC-nya Bilkis.
Bilkis. One second.
Bilkis.
This is not here. Ya nggak apa-apa.
Sedang join, Prof. Sebentar. Sudah.
Oke.
Nah, ini sudah. Saya admin. Bilkis. Bilkis. Oke, ya. This is Bilkis. Oke. Thank you, Bilkis.
Professor Jurgens, shall we start?
Yeah, it's fine. And
Yes. Okay, Bilkis, I think it's better to start now. Thank you.
Di unmute, Bilkis. Ya.
Okay, so since the time is showing 7 o'clock here, let's give it a kickoff for our event today. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our guest lecture titled Artificial Intelligence in Governance, hosted by the Graduate Program of Governance Science, Universitas Padjadjaran. We're delighted to have you all here for what promises to be a thought-provoking session. But before we're jumping too far, once again, we kindly ask all participants to turn your cameras on, use the virtual background provided, and please do remain respectful and keep your microphones muted throughout the event. Thank you. Okay, so let me continue. Ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here today, we find ourselves in an era defined by rapid digital transformation, where advancement in technology, most notably the rise of artificial intelligence, are reshaping the world around us. From communication and healthcare to education and industry, digitalization has permeated nearly every aspect of our daily lives. In governance, as we can see, artificial intelligence, or what we know as AI, holds the potential to revolutionize public services, improve decision-making, and increase transparency. Yeah, it also brings challenges that compel us to consider ethical implications and the need for responsible implementations. Hence, our theme for today's guest lecture, Artificial Intelligence in Governance, tries to unveil the role of artificial intelligence and its contribute to governance, especially in building a more efficient, responsive, and inclusive governments for the future. So here I am, Bilkis and Farisha. It's a pleasure to be your master of ceremony that will guide you for this event. But before starting the event, I would like to warmly welcome our distinguished guests today, the Honorable Vice Dean for Academic, Student, and Research Affairs, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Padjadjaran, as well as our moderator today, Professor Ida Widyaningsih, SIPMA PhD. Good evening. And the Head of Department of Governance Science, Professor Dr. Andes Haji Utang Suwaryo, MA. The Head of Graduate Program in Governance Science, Professor Dr. Haji Nandang Alamsyah Deliarno, SH, Hum. Good evening, sir. And of course, our distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Charles Jorgens from University of Amsterdam. If I'm not mistaken, it's only day there. So good afternoon, sir.
Good
And
afternoon.
also the esteemed lecturers, faculty members of FISIP Unpad, and last but not least, my esteemed fellow students, thank you for joining us today. And to begin on a thoughtful note, for wishing a successful and insightful session ahead, let us take a moment for a prayer in accordance with our own beliefs. Let us begin the prayer. Thank you. May the prayer always be upon us. And now, moving forward, we're honored to have with us today the head of the Graduate Program in Governance Science, Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Padjadjaran. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Haji Nandang Alamsyah Deliarno to deliver his welcoming remarks and formally commence the event. With all due respect, Professor Nandang, the screen and time is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Bilkis, Hanifah Risha. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my esteemed fellow students. Good evening, Prof. Charles Jurgen. We meet again in mirror screen now, yeah. Last week we met in Yogyakarta at International Governance. Didn't, sir? Didn't see we, sir? Yeah. As we open today's guest lecture, I would like to quote, yeah, a statement from Professor G. Heon now, Heon Won, yeah, Heon Won of Sungkyun Won University, who identified three determinant factors of social change today: massive and comprehensive globalizations or global governance, technological convergence, digital governance, and knowledge creation, yeah, knowledge-based government. From these factors, artificial intelligence has emerged. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in light of this, how does AI influence on and contribute to governance? On these occasions, we will thoroughly explore these questions together, certainly alongside Professor Jurgens, who will share his insight on this matter. Thank you, Prof. Jurgens, for your willingness to share some knowledge and engage with us today. Those present today include not only master's and doctoral students in government science, but also undergraduate students in government science, especially those enrolled in the course of electronic-based governance system, and students from the diploma program in digital archiving, along with their lecturers. I would also like to take this opportunity to that yeah, thanks the head of Department of Government Science, Prof. Utang, for his presence. And certainly, last but not least, Prof. Ida Widyaningsi, the Vice Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences Unpad, who not only has joined us, but has also graciously agreed to be the moderator for this event. Once again, thank you, Prof. Jurgens. I hope our collaborations will continue to grow stronger, strong in the future. Closing this speech, I'm reminded of a Dutch proverb, Mr. Jurgens. In het heavenly het verleden, in het nuat commensal. In the present lies the past, and what we gain now will determine what we will achieve in the future. I'm sorry if I commit several mistakes. Thank you very much. Good evening. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Nandang, for such an inspiring and encouraging words. And now, without further ado, we'll jump into the main session. As I said, a thought-provoking one, certainly, alongside our respectable speaker from University of Amsterdam, Professor Dr. Charles Jurgens. And so, I'd now like to introduce the moderator, marvelous one, that will guide the presentation and discussion on today's lecture. To the operator, please assist me in displaying her resume. Okay, so here is our marvelous moderator, Professor Ida Widyaningsi, well known as Professor Ida. She is a professor in the field of International Development Administration in the Department of Public Administration at the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Pajajaran. Currently, Professor Ida serves as the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Student Affairs, and Research at FISIP Unpad. She is also the Executive Director of the Center for Decentralization and Participatory Development Studies, actively conduct research at the Citarum Research Center and the Gender Research Center Unpad. She holds a PhD from Flinders Institute of Public Policy Management, Flinders University, Australia, Master degree in International Development, Flinders University, Australia, and Bachelor degree in Public Administration, Universitas Pajajaran. As an STEM academic, she continues to actively produce a diverse array of works and publications that address critical topics such as sustainable public policy analysis, social exclusion, international development, citizen participation, and many others. This extensive expertise makes her the ideal choice to serve as the moderator for today's lecture. Okay, thank you, Pratap. Okay, so without further ado, to Professor Ida Widyaningsi, 45 minutes from now, the screen and time is all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bilkis. Could you please to assist me to show the curriculum vitae of our guest lecture? Okay. Hello, everyone. I think that I welcome you to this session. I know this is not really the right time for Indonesian students for us, but because this is very interesting topic, I think this is why we can see more than 100 students and colleagues actually join us. Yeah, Professor Jurgen. Bilkis, could you please to help me to show the curriculum vitae? Okay. Well, before we start, I think I just briefly introduce our professor. Thank you very much for being with us. Professor Charles Jurgen, actually based at the University of Amsterdam, and he is an archival scholar with a strong foundation in social history and archival science, specializing in innovative methods for archival appraisal and selection. He is deeply interested in both historical contemporary archival processes focusing on the impact of digitation and AI on archiving practices, as well as a mechanism of meaning making, inclusion, and exclusion. His work also addresses the decolonization of heritage and archives since 2000. He has collaborated on numerous international projects alongside archivists, scholars, and curators in Indonesia, Suriname, Taiwan, Australia, Canada, Iceland, New Zealand, and Turkey. So he started his career as a researcher, but now he's a professor of archival studies, media studies at the University of Amsterdam until now from 2016. So could you please still move down? I think we have to do it a bit quicker. I think the second page, please. Can you move to the second page? Okay, so you can see his very long history of experience that is related to archive. So he studied in the area of history at the Leiden University and PhD in the Center for Environmental Studies and Department of History at the same university. And he's also archivistic at Dutch Archive School, The Hague, from 1991 to 1993. And of course, his work, there are so many works he's working on. And the latest one, actually working on the decolonizing archive and the need for emotional accessibility as part of a safer space, a book chapter in the book of the critical visitor changing heritage practices. And another work, Unsilencing Colonial Archive via Automated Entity or Recognition in the Journal of Documentation. Another work, actually working from home. This is related to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2023. And another important work related to the threat of future knowledge, the impact of the pandemic on and organizational record keeping. And the last one, archive and AI. I think this is very relevant with what he will briefly discuss today. This is an overview of the current debate and future perspective of archive and AI. I think that's all about our speaker today. And from the faculty, I'm representing our dean. We're really pleased to have you here with us. I understand that it is not easy for you. I think that Professor Nandang actually mentioned to me about you when you visited University of Gadjah Mada, but unfortunately it was a very short visit to Gadjah Mada, and we feel sorry that you couldn't come to our university, but hopefully in the near future you can be with us in person. Okay, without further ado, I think we have about 30 minutes to hear the lectures, and then after that we will have about 15 minutes discussion, question and answer session. Thank you very much. Professor Jürgen, you have your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for these nice introductions. I would like to share my screen first. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it is very good. We can see.
Okay.
Thank you very
Good.
much.
Yeah, so the topic is artificial intelligence and especially on archives. And I would like to also start with talking a little bit about the review, the article we wrote, Artificial Intelligence, that survey about how is artificial intelligence at this moment actually used within the archival realm. I think because it gives a nice overview of all kinds of developments that are taking place at this moment. And one of the things I would like to start with is to say a little bit about the big changes that digitization of society, I would say, because it's more than just digitizing information. What digitization of society, what kind of implications come from that, and then especially in the field of information management, but also information processing. In the first place, I think it's important to realize that information in the past was very much stable, focused on carriers, paper, documents. But the datification of these papers, the implication of that is that the records become actually aggregates of data. And that's a big difference. And I think it's very important to keep this in mind when I start talking about things such as accountability and transparency. Another thing, what happens because of digitization is that traditional principles, which are very close to the archival domain, such as provenance and original order, they come more and more under pressure. Because, once documents are data, these data can be grouped, structured in very different forms, very different ways. So all kind of questions come up. What does it actually mean about reliability of information? Of course, what is also very important is that the digitization, and especially when we also use artificial intelligence, it also creates a lot of new opportunities. It creates new forms of access. We can index big volumes of information based on whatever category we would like. But one of the points I want to make in this lecture is that although artificial intelligence will create a lot of new opportunities, it is also maybe important to think of the value of archival principles and how these values can be incorporated into applications of artificial intelligence. Think of provenance, think of appraisal, think of contextualization, think of transparency and accountability, because it's not self-evident how data are processed in machine processing environments, algorithms, what accountability actually means, what needs to be documented to be able to be transparent, to be able to be accountable. So these traditional archival values, although maybe in a completely different form, such as provenance, contextualization, are, in my opinion, still very important, also in the digital realm, but of course in a very different shape, in a very different form. So when we look at how artificial intelligence is used in the record-keeping profession, and record-keeping profession is also important, and that's probably also very close to maybe your interest from a governance perspective. Record-keeping is the keeping of data, the keeping of information from the moment of creation, while archives have most of the time the idea of material that is old, that has a certain age. Well, record keeping is actually related to both worlds. Record keeping is related to the management, the creation of records, of information, of data from the moment of that they start to exist. And I and some colleagues, and you can see them on the screen, Giovanna Colavisa, Tobias Blanca, and Julia Noordegraaf, we did an overview of what are actually the debates at this moment, and what are the future perspectives when we combine the world of archives, record keeping, and artificial intelligence. And we analyzed 53 publications which were published between 2015 and 2020. And only 1 month ago, another publication was published, which is not officially published yet, but preview is available on Arvix, which also did a survey on artificial intelligence in archival science about works that have been published between 2019 and 2023. Well, first, maybe what does it actually mean when we use artificial intelligence in our survey? It's very often used as a proxy for machine learning. So we can say artificial intelligence is a proxy for machine learning, the study and development of computer programs which automatically learn from data. And we, so the authors of the first survey, we used the records continuum model as a lens to structure that survey. And Schinde, that second survey, they use a much more traditional lens because they distinguish still very much between what they call records management and archival processing. When we zoom in a little bit more about that term artificial intelligence, we can say that it's actually a kind of umbrella term, because we can talk about natural language processing, named entity recognition, handwritten text recognition, information retrieval, that are all connected to natural language processing. But there are also the more traditional machine learning view, which is especially focusing on classification of more or less structured data to recognize patterns. While the more advanced forms of machine learning, the deep learning, they focus much more on very complex, unstructured data, for instance, image recognition, but also translation, that are examples of deep learning. And then there are also artificial intelligence applications which focus much more on visual data, images, videos. Computer vision is an example. And then a form which has really my biggest interest is what is called explainable AI. So what is actually required to transform the black box of algorithms to a kind of white box? What needs to be done to be able to understand what happens inside these black boxes? And especially for the purpose of accountability and transparency. Imagine that government make decisions with the help of algorithmic tools, and the algorithm says a kind of, the computer says this or that. Then if the government wants to be transparent and accountable for how does the computer come to that conclusion, then then the government needs to be able to explain how the artificial intelligence has been applied, but also what happened within the processing done by the artificial intelligence tools, and how are the tools constructed. And that is, in my opinion, also very close to the purpose of record keeping, because record keeping, one of the largest purposes, is not only to have documentation about the past, but also to provide documentation that helps explain, that helps to make accountable, helps to make transparent what has happened in, for instance, decision making. When we look at the results of the surveys, we can also see that actually the way artificial intelligence is used is still in its infancy, as I may say, because it's especially about automating things that are already performed manually. For instance, that survey done by Schinde, they see in records management areas examples of artificial intelligence which helps to classify, which helps to to automate retention and the disposition of information. It helps in archiving processes to speed up appraisal, arrangement, and description by automatically extracting metadata. It also helps in access and use of information, for instance, by speeding up the retrieval, but also to label what might be privacy sensitive information in documents. When we look from the perspective we took in our survey, as I told you, we make use of the records continuum model. And the records continuum model distinguishes between dimensions. The dimension of create, the dimension of capture, the dimension of organize, and the dimension of pluralize. And in itself, this framework, this model, this records continuum model, is very important in the connection to artificial intelligence use. And why? Because imagine that data are created. And data are always created somewhere, somehow. These data will be captured because otherwise they cannot exist. These captured data will be organized in a way, and very often these data will also be pluralized in a way that others have access to these data. But these same data can be actually recreated at the moment these data are used for different purposes. And that's the continuum thinking. The continuum thinking is that there is not a kind of end station, a kind of natural end station of these data, because these data can be reused for very different purposes, or only parts of these data are reused. So it's always a form of creation, recreation, capture, recapture, organize, reorganize, pluralize, repluralize, etc. What we noticed is that in application of artificial intelligence, most works we identified are related to the pluralize and organize dimensions. For instance, how to give access to data, how to organize data, but hardly on the dimensions of the create and the capture. Although I think it's very important to get the focus also on those dimensions, and I will explain later why. So the main observations from our surveys is that it's especially also about automating record-keeping processes, appraisal, classification, how to identify sensitive information, especially in the context of privacy regulations, creating metadata, but also about organizing, accessing archives, indexation, distant reading, which means to identify patterns in large volumes of texts, and of course the search and retrieval are very much helped by applications of AI. What is less available is, for instance, attention from within the archival articles, journals about explainable AI. Some articles write about the relevance of methods from archives libraries to address issues such as transparency and ethics, and also privacy. And some others refer to the term paradata. And paradata are actually, so we all know probably the word metadata, information about information or data about data, to understand the context. But paradata are especially data which are registered, created to document what kind of choices people have made, for instance, in building artificial intelligence tools. So it's a form of documenting. And the purpose of that documenting is to enlarge, to improve transparency, and to be able to make understandable to the future for what purpose such a tool has been created, based on what training data, for instance, that tool has been used for and made it work, also for applications in the real world. That type of documenting is called paradata. So it's a relatively new term. There are some publications about this. And there's hardly any information about the new forms of digital archives that are created because of application of artificial intelligence. Think of sensor data. Sensor data are very important forms of new data that are kind of always running data that are recorded, but they are also combined with other data, and they are processed. So there are new forms of digital archives are constructed at this moment, which didn't exist before digitization of society, and didn't exist before the application of computational algorithms. So one of the questions also here from a governance perspective is what needs to be done to make it understandable, to make accountable, to make transparent how these records are created, but also for what purpose these records have been created. And this is, of course, all in the context of what we call the civil society, the rule of law, in which it is important that governments can be transparent and accountable. So basically the findings, so much work on automating archival processes at several levels, appraisal, information extractions, and search, but most discussion about the technical, ethical, and societal implications of using AI in archival processes are yet to take place. That's a very important conclusion of what we found out based on the application, on the analysis of all these journal articles and conference papers. I want to briefly go back to the records continuum and to make use of an example to explain a bit how this model is used, but also what is the relevance of this model. So here in the corner we see so-called ship logs. Skippers were already for centuries obliged to take notes every day about weather conditions, about the position where they were, and they produced so-called ship logs. Once the ship returned to the harbor, these ship logs were delivered to the company, and these ship logs were preserved and sometimes were used for something. But nowadays, these logs become very important information for very different purposes. Already in the early 20th century, and we see here a picture, a lot of these ship logs were put in kind of machine-readable punch cards. And that is what we see on this picture. So the weather, place, wind direction, temperature, etc., etc. These were transferred to a digital format in the form of punch cards. And actually what happens is that this is actually a recreation of this information. It's a recreation in a different form, in a different organizational form, which will also serve very different purposes. And what happens later is that this information is also used again for very recent research. For instance, here we see an app in which temperature and all kinds of weather conditions of a certain place are communicated via an app. And here again, we see a kind of recreation of partly this type of information. And what is very interesting nowadays is that this type of information becomes very crucial, the information that was registered in these old ship logs for current climate research. And because we are able to make use of all these weather registrations to do current research to the change of climate. And when we make use of this model and future-oriented, we will notice that everything will be digital. Also in the first creation of this information will be digital, but it will be reused, recreated, reorganized in many, many different ways. And this model will be helpful to identify the contexts in which these data are used in for certain different purposes. That's actually the model, which is the central function of the model. It's very different from the former models that looked at records as very static. And they were created, they were used for a certain time, and after a certain time they were not used anymore, and a few small parts would be transferred to national archives or other archival institutions, and the rest will be destroyed. So that was called a life cycle. But that life cycle is not a helpful metaphor anymore in our data world in which everything is datafied. We need to have understanding of the quality of the data, and the quality of the data is for a big part defined by understanding why these data was created, for what purpose, how these data were processed, and whether, and that's a very important question, whether a new form of processing of these same data, but for a different purpose, is actually still something that can be done in a way that is defendable. Because reuse of data that are created for a very different purpose sometimes actually is very dangerous to make use of them because they were never created for that purpose. Well, nowadays we are in the time frame of what some scholars say hyperhistory. And the big change is that actually the data, the information that is used, created, is not so much documenting our time, but is much more defining our time. It's steering our time. And while in the past things were documented for the sake of memory, but in our data-driven society, data is actually everything. And we see it sometimes also very close to our daily life. At the moment that there's a big hack, or at the moment that the software update doesn't work, there's no traffic possible anymore from the airplanes or from the trains. We very recently had a big problem in the Netherlands because of a big hack that train traffic was impossible. And so data are steering our society. And that's a big difference. And also people become more and more datafied. And we see here a kind of image of this. So it requires also a rethinking of how to process, but also especially how to manage these data, that we as a society, we as people, can still be in control of these data, and that people can decide based on arguments whether these data can be used for the purpose they want to be used. And so that's a societal responsibility. And transparency is a very important term in that context. And transparency is very easily used. We need to be transparent and so on, but what does it actually mean? Well, this is a definition of transparency, which I think is very adequate. It's written, described by several authors, Porumbescu, Meyer, etc. That are all a few scholars who define transparency as the availability of information about an organization or an actor, allowing external parties to monitor the internal workings or performance of that organization or that actor. So, yeah, that internal workings, that's actually the trigger. And what is required to be able to monitor the internal workings or the performance of an organization or an actor? I would argue that also the computational algorithm is an actor. And one of the challenges is to define what is actually required to be able to understand the internal workings of that actor. What needs to be documented? Well, we have been working on that question also in our projects. And I think, how much minutes do I still have left before I... Do I have...
Yeah, I think you can wrap up. Do you, how many slides do you have?
Well, I have more
I think you
than
can
I
have
think.
Yeah.
5 minutes?
Yeah, I think 3 to 5 minutes is okay.
Okay,
You
good.
can continue.
Yeah, okay, then I will close this part. Because there are many examples of, also in the Netherlands, about scandals in making use of algorithms. And so here is an example written by Politico. A Dutch scandal serves as a warning for Europe of a risk of using algorithms, in which an example of the Dutch tax authorities, they made use of an algorithm to detect fraud of taxation. And although there has been already a lot of discussion about how fraud can be detected with the help of algorithm, there's still no good form used by the tax authorities to be transparent about that. And why not? Because the tax authorities are afraid that once they open up the algorithm and say how it works, that the criminals can make use of that. And of course, that's a real risk. But we also know that it's very much about, not so much about what are the variables that are used, but especially about the weighing of these variables. So many scholars say, well, the tax authorities can be transparent about showing what are the variables that have been used to make that decision, without showing how these variables were assessed to each other. And then you are transparent, but you don't give criminals the opportunity to exactly make use of these variables by understanding how these were assessed towards each other. And so that is one form of becoming more transparent and working on transparency. Another form is that this explainable AI and record keeping. And so in this, these components are most of the time regarded as important components for being able to be transparent and work on explainable AI. And especially when we look from a record keeping perspective, these three first parts are very connected to record keeping. And so what needs to be done to reduce the impact of bias in the model that is produced? So very important in that respect is, of course, be very open and clear about what are the assumptions made in the algorithmic tooling. Who is responsible for making and using these algorithmic tools? Because the making is one thing, but the use is another thing. Is that clearly defined? And who is accountable for what? And what are the mechanisms in place that can be applied once there are problems? And the last thing is, of course, the whole governance of this. And actually, that encompasses almost all components. The governance, how do you organize this? So that are all examples of how record keeping can contribute to also to explainable AI. And it is very much focusing on the quality of the data, understanding the way these data have been used, processed, but also understanding the let's say the software that has been developed, the artificial intelligence decisions that have been made, the assumptions that have been made, to be explicit about them. Documenting is the first of these parts, and only then you can be accountable, transparent, and you can work on what is called explainable AI. Well, I think that is for wrapping up this part. Of course, I have a lot of examples in which we also make use of all these knowledge in projects that we have been working on. But this is more the theoretical framework which has been developed and we have made use of to do our work in practice. Well, thank you for your attention so far.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Please keep on applause. Yes, difficult. Thank you. We have about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. If you have any question, you can post it on the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can record and respond. Okay, we have Gloria here. Anybody else? So Siti Sophia. Okay, Gloria, Siti. I think in the first round, probably I can take 3 questions, another student or other participants. We have around 140 participants today, Professor Jurgens. Yeah, I think they are not only students, but also some other colleagues from other institutions also join us today. Okay, probably we could start with Gloria. Okay, you can open your mic, Gloria, please.
Okay, good evening, everybody, especially Prof. Nandang and Prof. Ida, and good afternoon to Professor Charles Jurgens as in Netherlands time. And also thank you for the time and opportunity for me to ask and discuss from this lecturing. Okay, I'm actually Gloria, and now I'm studying government science at Physics Unpad, and actually on my second year. And my specific question is actually to what are actually the specific ethical implication of AI in applying for government, and how do we ensure they align with our government values on organization, such as transparency, accountability, and I'm asking for the fulfillment and the need for ethical considerations, ensuring that AI systems do not perpetuate biases or discrimination. I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. Professor Jurgen, is that clear enough, the question?
Yeah,
Okay, I
very
think we
clear.
can take, yeah, I think we could collect the question from Sofia Turrohman. Okay, you can have your time, please.
Okay, good evening for Professor Ida, good evening, Professor Nandang, and good afternoon for Professor Jurgens, and everyone in this room also. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you for giving me these opportunities. It was very insightful and amazing presentation, actually. Okay, my name is Siti Sofia Rohma, but you can call me Shiva. I am from graduate study in government science. Before I would like to sharing about my experience after finishing one of books relating to AI in the governance, particularly. So I actually just finished a book with the title is Homo Deus. It was one of New York bestselling book written by Yuval Noah Harari. It's generally it's explained about how the bad implication and where's potential artificial intelligence in the future. So there's a statement and hypothesis in this book that say for overusing AI in governance will open up the possibility of data bias and also making or limiting the policymakers in the decision-making process, and also give the bigger autonomous for the AI itself. And at the end, it will open up disparities in the social because inappropriate policy. So as someone aspired to be a researcher and also as an academician, I would like to ask you about how far we can utilizing the AI in the world, in the academic world, particularly in government or governance process, and also what about the limitation that we should concern when we using AI in the governance process. Yeah, so that's all for me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate every answer that will provided. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shiva. So we have two questions from Gloria and Shiva, both asking about the relationship between AI and the impact on governance, including the bias, etc. Okay, would you like to have the answer now, Professor Jürgen? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for these good, very important questions. And they are also a little bit related to each other, I would say, because it's both about ethics and very much on, yeah, what are also the risks of making use of AI by governments. And yeah, that's especially where this explainable AI comes in. And because explainable AI tries to find ways to at least to be transparent and clear about what is actually happening. But I think it's very important to distinguish, on the one hand, let's say the creating of artificial intelligence tools by most of the time, of course, people who are software oriented and people who are making use of AI. To give a very interesting example, even in the judges make use of AI. There are quite some examples that what is the risk that someone who has been judged as a criminal, that the same problems will occur in the future. And also judges make, based on an analysis of different variables make use of artificial intelligence tools. And in the Netherlands, there has been one experiment done by at what moment do judges make use of it? Before they have formed their own opinion or after they have formed their own opinion? And that seems a very small thing, but the difference can be very big, because once these judges, that was the outcome of that investigation. Once judges make use of that artificial intelligence, that algorithm, before they made their own judgment, then that algorithm was actually steering their own opinion. While when they did it the other way around, then it was more a kind of, or it was confirmed, or the algorithm made a different choice, and then it was at least a starting point for a discussion among the judges. So it is, I think, on the one hand, it is about developing algorithms and artificial intelligence tooling, which requires proper input, which requires important data that have the proper quality, also data that are qualified for the purpose that actually is served, that the data is not biased, although that's very difficult, because I'm afraid that almost always there will be a kind of bias, but that there's an awareness of what are possible biases in these data. And of course, when there's very clear bias, then these data cannot be used. And that's very difficult to exclude all these things completely. But yeah, once you are going to use these applications, these artificial intelligence, these algorithms in government environments, yeah, it's of course a very big responsibility that people are not becoming the victims of data that are wrongfully used for the purpose they are used for, or that the algorithms are developed in a way that they have a lot of assumptions which are completely full of biases. So yeah, that is actually, when I combine both questions, that still a lot of research needs to be done, and every time a tool is used, artificial intelligence is used, a computational algorithm is used, that if the tool is completely closed, cannot be monitored, yeah, from a government perspective, I think it is not a responsible choice to make use of them if they are not open. And open does not mean that it is necessarily open for everyone in society, but if a monitoring forum, for instance, when we look from an accountability perspective, there needs to be always, you have an actor and you have a forum. And the forum, for instance, when we look at the state, the parliament is the forum for the ministers. And when the ministers needs to be accountable for what they have done, yeah, the parliament in the end can say, well, we do not accept this answer because this is not complete or whatever, and a minister can be sent home in many states. So that is the mechanism. So these types of mechanisms can also be installed in analyzing the quality of algorithms or the quality of artificial intelligence applications, in which a specific forum, a group of experts, can investigate whether that algorithm meets the rules of law, say it in this way, without making the algorithm completely open to everybody to avoid that also criminals can make use of that. And so in that line of thinking is how I would like to answer these two questions. And CTU, I think you mentioned also the book of Harari. Yeah. How far can we utilize AI in government was one of your questions. I think only when the government also understands what are the risks of applying, and when they also have a very good view on for what purpose the AI is used, and whether the data that are used have the quality for that use. If the answer is no, yeah, then it is, in my view, irresponsible to make use of such applications. And then you will have big risks as a society, but especially as people who will become the victim of such applications because the computer says no, for instance, and you cannot fly anymore. So that's a little bit I can say.
All right, that's a very interesting perspective on your question on how far actually AI can be utilized in the government area. Okay, we still have about 15 minutes for question and answer. If anyone want to post some question, you can post it on the chat or you can raise your hand. Okay, I have to check any other question. All right. Okay. Is there? I think I give some this for you to answer to Professor Julie try to analyze about the impact of AI recently and how it actually connected with the government work at this moment. Okay. If any of you don't have any question, Professor Jürgen, probably you want to add some more important concept, because I think this is quite a new concept in the area of how to connect archive and AI. So I think that this is quite new area for our students and also our colleagues. But this is clearly our future that we really have to understand how it works and the implication, including the risk, and as well as in the area of ethics and other impact that might caused by the new development of technology and AI.
Yeah, so I can say a little bit more about that if you want.
Yes, please, because you still have a bit time for this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably you can wrap up just a bit, giving a bit highlight to us students how important it is to try to look at a bit deeper about the archive when it connect with AI.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the ethics is indeed the most important part at this moment. What is ethics? That we understand how things may have immediate effects on people's lives. And the word archive is maybe always a bit a problematic word in the sense that the association, at least here in Europe, is always that it has to do with old papers. Well, that is not the case anymore. So maybe we talk about records information, because in a government perspective, a government cannot work without information. A government is completely dependent on data and information. And I'm sure that the students cannot imagine of a government doing their job without having information. So that is the basic, that is the start of thinking of records and archives and data. And yeah, what is the difference between data and information? That's of course also an important question. In my opinion, data are, at least I always explain to my students, data are signals that are recorded, but you can read them, but without immediate meaning. And so when you have a figure 1 or 2 or 5 or 8, or of course I can read it, I can read letters, but no idea what they mean. But once I know the context, that let's say the figure 12 is connected to a temperature scale, then I know already a little bit more. Because then I know, hey, that has to do about weather conditions. So then it becomes the information. And so the connection between the understanding the meaning of these signals, yeah, then the data becomes information. And why is this important? That, yeah, in the paper world, when we didn't have digital tools, yeah, then there was, yeah, of course you could write letters without any other context, but in most cases, in most instances, it was just a document, a paper document, in which words, lines were written. So immediately the context was given in the document, by the document. That makes the data understandable because they were always in the context of other words. Well, in a datafied world, and so when all these signals can be separately be used, yeah, that datafication makes it also possible to very easily combine all these signals with other signals for very different purposes. So the data become more and more important because data can be used and reused for very different purposes at the same time. There is no stable record anymore by itself, because these data are fluid. They can be used, reused. That is the very big difference between these two worlds, the paper world and the digital world. But our mindset is, especially the older people, maybe younger students, fortunately have the advantage that they have not so much a paper mind anymore, but still our concepts are very much concepts which are still embedded in the paper minds. And when we look at the computer, we still talk about folders. Well, in the computer, there are no folders. There are metadata which connect, which make the connections. But our concepts, our ideas, are still very much based on that paper idea, that physical, tangible ideas. And also, for instance, the how to keep information, how to preserve information for the long run. The idea to transfer information from, let's say, the systems to an archival institution is very much still based on that paper idea that once it is in the archival institution, it is safe. In the paper world, yes, but in the digital world, no. Because preserving digital data, digital information, requires a constant active policy on that information. Otherwise, it will not be, you will not be able to access it anymore after some time. So it's a complete different flow.
Okay, I'm really sorry, Professor. I have to stop the discussion. This is really very important and interesting topic because we all knew that artificial intelligence actually now developing very quickly, and the government are facing much more complex challenge compared to the previous life. And you have highlight the important to have a look at new way of government works and how actually we have to perceive the new characteristic of archives. That archive, as you said, is something really dynamic and fluid. But in terms of governance area, we could ignore the importance of archive, but the function, the model, the form actually changing. And of course, there is some huge difference between the traditional and digital worlds. Um, and it is actually the future challenge for governance, for the government, that in the future, I think that the government will keep rely on the data for information, for decision in the future. So thank you very much again for your comment and for the question from Siti, City, but Sophia and also Gloria. You read very interesting books and also pose some critical question. What actually will happening to the government in the future, and to what extent actually we can use AI in the government? Because yes, Professor Jurgen highlight the challenge about ethics in the use of AI. I think this is not only in the government, but when we use something like deepfake, it is something really scary actually for us. And how we in the government area can anticipate that. And I think this is the research of Professor Jurgen, very important for us to keep alert that yes, the government will need data for well-informed data for decision making, but we also have to be aware about the characteristic of the data that actually very dynamic and fluid in the modern era. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Jugan. I think that hopefully we can meet you in person in the future, yeah, Professor Nandang. Hopefully we can invite him and discuss a little bit more, because we have in our faculty, actually we have probably the one and only digital archive department. Some students actually here now, and I think that's the future of archive research. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much again. And I think it is time for us to share the appreciation for Professor Jurgen. Okay, probably I should ask, I forgot who's the MC, Bilkis. Probably it's better, yeah, I just give it back to you, the forum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ida. Well, fantastic. Thank you once again, Professor Ida and Professor Charles Jurgens, for such an insightful lecture and discussion. And now, as a token of appreciation, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude with our certificate that will be presented by the head of Department of Governance Science, Professor Dr. Andes Haji Utang Suwaryo. To the operator, please assist me by displaying the certificate. Okay, Mr. Agustariana, is there a problem with the certificate? Okay, so this is a certificate. And now we would like to invite Professor Tang to present the certificate.
I think if Professor Utang is not available, we can ask Professor Nandang to do so. Professor Nandang, please.
Sure.
Yeah. For Professor Jurgen, thank you very much. This is certificate for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, for
And
my
next, the certificate. Yes. And next, the certificate for Professor Ida as our moderator for today. To the operator, please help me to display the certificate. Okay, so this
Terima
is
kasih
it.
ini, Prof.
Yeah.
Ida. Ya,
Sama-sama, Prof. Nandang. Thank you very much.
luar
Very appreciate.
biasa.
Nah, this is very good effort. I
Saya.
appreciate your effort to connect with Professor Jürgen. Yeah, we really do hope that this is not the last time for us. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Actually,
Okay.
Prof. Jurgens, I want to ask you one question about advantage and disadvantage EA in future human being. Next time. Okay.
It's a good thing for next time. But I'm
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I was invited for this. It's very nice to have this opportunity, and it's really nice to have so many students and other people who attended this class because it's already late in your country.
Yeah.
Because most of the time students here will not come at 7 o'clock.
Yeah,
So thank
Thank you
you for
very
that.
much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, thank you, Prof. Nandang, for presenting the certificate. And also, it has been an honor to have Professor Ida and Professor Jurgens, both of you, today for this insightful lecture session. Once again, thank you for being with us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the close of today's lecture on artificial intelligence and governance, we have seen how AI is reshaping the landscape of records management and archival processing. By examining these topics through the lens of archival theory, we understand the significant impact of artificial intelligence has on traditional practices. Automation in record-keeping processes is revolutionizing how we organize and access archives, allowing for greater efficiency and accuracy. And this shift brings forth the concept of explainable AI, ensuring transparency and clarity in the decision-making process, which is essential in the realm of governance. So that's it. And now, before closing the event, we will now proceed with the documentation session. So please, ladies and gentlemen, kindly turn your cameras on and don't forget to use the provided virtual background. We'll give you some time to get yourself ready. So please don't hesitate to show your charming faces. Okay. And to the operator, please help me assist by capturing the screen as I'll give the cue for everyone. Okay. So the first slide is full. We'll wait for the second slide to be full. Okay.
Okay, next one from Anindya to Gary. Please open your cam and we.
Professor Jürgen, I forgot to mention that actually we have two international students join us, Augustine from Kenya and Fad. Yeah, they are actually joining my class, Public Administration and Governance, but one of the topic is actually about ICT and AI. That's Fad. Yeah, hi Fad. What do you think about the lecture? Yeah, Fad and Augustine, you can say hi to Professor. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Ida and Dr. Jagon. I've followed the lecture from the beginning, and it has been quite an insightful session with a lot of informative, and I'm really happy to join other colleagues from FISIP, and I hope that we shall keep the engagement and the fire burning. We are really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Nice.
Okay, so I think everyone's ready for the documentation session. So I'll give the cue. I'll count from 1 to 3, and let's say cheese. To the operator, please assist me by capturing the screen from slide 1. Okay, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, so let's proceed to the second slide. Okay, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, and we still get the third slide, I think. Mr. Agus, please help me capture the third slide. Okay. Once again, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, so that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our event for today. Many thanks to all participants who have attempted and actively participate in today's lecture. We would also like to convey our deepest gratitude to our speaker, Professor Jorgens, and of course, Professor Ida as our moderator. Thank you for being with us today, and also committees and everyone involved in this event. Well, everyone, it was a pleasure to meet you and to lead today's event. I really am hoping to see you in another changes. And finally, closing today's event, I am Bilkis, your master of ceremony, signing out. Good evening, everyone, and cheerio. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
later.
you, everyone.
Nuhun
Sudah.
Pak Anda semuanya. Nuhun. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih, Pak
Bye bye.
Ida.
Sayonara ya.
Ya, izin saya tutup.